Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Seeing that it is a little bit now past 6:30, 6:34 to be exact on May 28th. Seeing that we have a quorum, I'd like to call to order the Wilmington Wildwood Early Childhood Center Building Committee meeting, again for this evening of May 28th, 2024. We will, as always, take a roll call. But before we do, it's with pleasure that I'd like to introduce a new member of our committee. And our newest member of our school committee, Nick Boland, is here. He's replaced MJ, who has stepped down from the committee. And so welcome, Nick. Thank you for being here. David Ragsdale continues for the school committee, and Mr. Turner continues as an alternate. So with that, if we could start with a roll call, please.
Absolutely. Diane Allen.
Here.
Greg Bendel. Kate Bissell. Glenn Brand.
Here.
Alice Brown LeGrand.
Here.
Kevin Kyra. Michael Camisio.
Here.
Lou Simagalia. I can't see this. Not here. Justin Couchet.
Here.
Marianne Galezzo. Christine Holleran.
Here.
John Holloway. Dennis Kelly.
Here.
I can't even see this. Paul Melorani.
Here.
Craig Miner.
Here.
Christine Pendergast. Here. David Ragsdale.
Here.
Paul Ruggiero.
Here.
Stacy Scott.
Here.
Nick Golden.
Here.
Vivian Verbedian. Here.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We will jump right in to the approval of minutes. This is from the May 1st meeting of the school building committee. And we are looking for a motion to approve tonight. So moved. Thank you.
Second.
Second. Thank you. Roll call.
Diane.
Yes.
Kate. Glenn.
Yes.
Alice.
Yes.
Michael.
Yes.
Justin.
Yes.
Christine.
Yes.
Holleran.
Yes.
Dennis.
Yes.
Paul. Melorani.
Yes. Yes.
Christine Pendergast. Yes. David Ragsdale.
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero.
Yes.
Stacy Scott.
Abstain.
Golden.
Abstain.
And myself, yes.
Thank you very much, everyone. Item 3 tonight is the approval of invoices for warrant number 12. Julie.
Good evening, everyone. We have presenting tonight warrant article number 12. First up is SMMA's invoice for services for the month of May in the amount of $7,500. And then Doran Whittier Architects invoice in the amount of $31,500 again for the month of May. Total amount $39,000. Dennis Kelly with a recommendation from the working group.
I'd like to make a motion to approve warrant number 12 in the amount of $39,000.
I'll second.
With that, thank you. Roll call.
Diane Allen.
Yes.
Kate Bissell.
I think Kate was not present.
Thank you. Glenn Brand.
Yes.
Alice Brown LeGrand.
Yes.
Michael Camisio.
Yes.
Justin Couchet.
Yes.
Christine Holleran.
Yes.
Dennis Kelly.
Yes.
Paul Megliani.
Yes.
Christine Pendergast. Yes. David Ragsdale.
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero.
Yes.
Stacy Scott.
Yes.
Nick Golden.
Yes.
Myself, yes.
Thank you, everyone. Tonight, focus will shift to an update on the design. And with the design team turn over to Doran Whittier in just a moment, and then we'll follow that with a schedule update as we move forward in this next phase. We will also, it's not here on the agenda tonight, but we'll have to address this following these updates, is updated information that has just really literally today been passed on from MSBA, but we'll get to that in just a moment. But let's start with the design update, right?
Thank you, Dr. Brandt. So we wanted to give you an update on where we've refined the designs over the past month. We obviously have the short list, and so you'll see the red boxes around the pre-K3 new at N1, which is a new construction at Woburn Street, and then the pre-K5 N1, which is new construction at North Intermediate. So we started work on the pre-K5, and we also simultaneously took the feedback that we received from administration through some of the programming meetings that we had over the last month and started to refine the designs. And so we were able to start working on both of those simultaneously because they were similar enough. And we will start with the pre-K5 since it's the largest, and subtract from there. So as a refresher, this is what we submitted at PDP. The building is located on north of the site, and it still will remain in that location for this option. And I'm going to turn it over to Jason to discuss the developments in the plan layout.
So in broad strokes, the first thing we want to share is that we're moving from a conceptual bubble diagram way of illustrating these concepts to a more hardline technique for illustrating these concepts. Remember that we're in feasibility study right now. So the whole point of it is to test whether or not we can arrange the program elements with the spatial relationships that are desired by the district and get them to fit on the various sites with both the opportunities and constraints that those sites have. So what you're looking at right now is the first floor plan, as Ronnie mentioned, of the pre-K5 N1, which is the new at North for approximately 755 students plus pre-K. And you can see that just the illustrative quality of this has changed since the PDP submission to be much more rigid geometry or well-defined geometry. And as Ronnie mentioned, we've had a few programmatic changes based on some new information about the daily school schedule, how many times each one of the specials is going to be offered, for example. So this round of design progress includes those programmatic updates also. So Ron, if you don't mind just sort of orienting folks to the front door, they're in the lower right-hand corner of the illustration. Philosophically, the diagram is identical to where we were in PDP, with the public elements to the right of the illustration and the academics to the left of the illustration beyond a security threshold, which we'll point out in a moment. The gym, the orange rectangle, remains at the center of the concept. The cafeteria to the right of the gymnasium with the stage in between, kitchen and servery still to the back with both the custodial and the main mechanical area all to the north edge of the public side. On the south edge of the public side, we have an administration and guidance presence right next to the front door. Then the little brown rectangle is nurse and medical. We haven't yet in this round of iteration articulated all of the small rooms that go inside those suites of spaces, but we would expect both the administration and guidance and the medical suite to have smaller rooms inside of what currently is just these polygon shapes. Then to the left of that, we have the OTPT suite that consists of a physical therapy classroom, an occupational therapy classroom, and then some dedicated storage to those programs. Because again, we have things like drive-up services for students that take advantage of some of those program elements. We have an entry that's right near those that's also happens to be located next to the medical suite for ease of access. Completing the public side, and Ron, if you could just indicate the new security threshold there between chorus and art, the two red spaces, yeah, just right there. So in the PDP phase, we had 2 art rooms, 2 music rooms, an instrumental music room, and now based on some new information about what programs and services are going to be offered in terms of specials and how many times are going to be offered in a cycle, we've been able to remove 1 music space from the project and remove 1 art space and just be more efficient with the spaces that we have, that we've got in the project. And then because of things like 7 sections of kindergarten, we've introduced something called a flex classroom that could, when we have too many sections of art to accommodate all in one day, we have this flex classroom that could serve as an art classroom on one day, could serve as a chorus room on another day, or could serve as a health room on another day, sort of a multi-purpose space. And we'll get into why we've located it where we have in just a moment. So we've got the art and the chorus on the public side. We've oriented the doors to those so that they're accessible from the public side of the security threshold, and then the pre-K elements are on the secure side in that same wing. In addition to reducing the specials for art and music, we've now have clarification on the number of pre-K classrooms for the project. Previously in the PDP, we had 4 pre-K classrooms plus 2 self-contained special education spaces associated with pre-K. We now have 3. So we've modified the geometry of this portion of the concept to reflect that reduction in pre-K classrooms. Then in the north wing, we have all of the kindergarten classrooms. And again, the pink space is a self-contained special education environment. And then in both cases, in both wings, the light blue spaces are some of those interstitial instructional areas, extended learning spaces that we've spent a lot of time talking about, and that were observed in many of the tours that we talked about, that we went on, that will form an important part of the instructional environment. The last thing we'll say about this floor is that in between the 2 wings, we've been able to squeeze this concept together so that we have some specialists, the elevator, right, a main custodial closet in that center zone, instead of having either art or music or other program elements between the 2 classrooms. And as we can demonstrate, it means that the whole concept is much, much narrower north to south than it was previously, which means things like the wetlands will not have as big an impact on site circulation or playgrounds or even where the building goes, as perhaps was the case during the PDP phase. So that's the ground floor. Things are very similar on the second floor. And again, Ron, if you can just point out the security thresholds, in this case, they're by the stairs right there. And then the north wing, similarly up by the stairs. So on the second floor, on the public side, we have the health classroom, the science, technology, engineering, we might call it a STEM classroom, adjacent to the library, which is what is in yellow. Then in addition to that, we have staff lunchroom space. That's the green square up there on the second floor, based on a request from faculty and staff to be sort of close to the cafeteria, sort of part of that experience, but removed enough that they're not embedded in the cafeteria itself. So this is our current interpretation of where that might be able to go. In terms of the classrooms, very similar to what we have going on down below. We've got 1st and 2nd grade on the second floor with some sprinkling of self-contained special education spaces, again in pink, with the extended learning spaces sort of scattered throughout to form what we might call town squares. And so maybe, Ronnie, you can demonstrate that by sort of the 4 classrooms, right? Exactly. Where right now we're showing openings to those classrooms on the shared extended learning space at the heart of those 4 classrooms. On the left-hand side, we have another one that's shared between the 2 end classrooms. And then similarly, we've got a special education space and a general classroom that share the extended learning space on the right-hand side of this illustration. The intent with those extended learning spaces is to provide immediate access directly outside of classrooms rather than to be sort of a down the hall and around the corner centralized experience, so that they can maximize their usefulness for classroom teachers, for specialists, for MTSS experiences. And so both wings on the second floor are similar in their expression in that regard. We've not yet been able to articulate the 3rd floor of this, but if you recall, we have both these north and south wings, but then we have a 3rd grade level, because the 3rd floor is going to house grades 3, 4, and 5. And right now the intent is to have the 3rd grade grouping hover over the top of the gymnasium, and we pull them on top of the gymnasium as the way of being the most efficient with not only a footprint on the site, but with the amount of exterior wall we have, the amount of exterior building envelope we have. And since that already exists as part of the footprint, our PDP concept suggested that was the best place to put that 3rd grade grouping. By way of comparing, this next slide illustrates to scale where the PDP concept was in terms of its geometry, and we would draw your attention to the overall width, sort of top of the page to the bottom of the page, versus where we are now. The courtyard, the three-sided courtyard is much narrower, but still appropriate for the size and height of the wings. But the whole concept has been shortened north to south again to help with being efficient with the square footage and to get it properly on the site.
I think this also, just as a reminder, is we used to refer to the PDP drawing as almost using a fat Sharpie, and now we've refined it with a thinner Sharpie. And so that's part of what you're seeing happening here.
And that same process will continue. We get into schematic design. We'll be using a sharper tool to draw things even more accurately at that next stage.
Yeah.
So our intent would be to exercise this kind of design iteration for all of the options that are still under consideration for this phase. We're just reporting back on the first two of them tonight.
Can you elaborate a little on why you decided to pull out that multi-use art space outside in the public area versus
Oh, yes.
the private?
Thank you. So in some of our programming meetings, the CARES program, for example, have made an initial request to have their own dedicated classroom environment for after-school activities. And in order to be efficient with not only square footage, but for cost savings, to not duplicate that function by positioning this flex classroom in this location, and it happens to be immediately across the hall from the CARES offices, that perhaps after school as a multi-purpose environment, it could very easily serve that function that was requested without the need to add another dedicated specialized space.
Sorry, one other question. If you wouldn't mind, like, I understand where orientation wise, the entrance to the new school, and then you go down the corridor to the pub, it's still considered public spaces on the interior, not the exterior. Where is the checkpoint to get into the private spaces, more the secured? I see the two art classrooms. Is that where the entrance point is?
Yeah, so again, right, these are designs in progress, so lots of things can evolve. What we're trying to illustrate here is that you could have a secured moment between the chorus room and the art room that would not allow you to get into the classroom or the pre-K wing, but still have access to the chorus room and the art room from the public side of that threshold. And then there's a similar set of double doors on the north side. Right
Can
there.
I poke holes at that though? Yeah.
Yes.
Because you still have that central corridor that's running vertically, and so those are exposed.
They are,
in the event of.
but there are no general classrooms in that environment. In fact, that's where the group toilet rooms are to serve the gym and the cafeteria. So now the public side of the house actually rings the gym all the way around, but you still can't get to classrooms because of where the security thresholds are
But
located.
are those students going to be using those public restrooms? So that means they have to exit to use those bathrooms?
So on this particular floor, right, every classroom has its own toilet. So no, on this floor,
Okay.
right, and the security thresholds are in a slightly different location on the second floor.
Okay.
Right? And then in addition to the group toilet rooms, there are individual toilet rooms scattered around. But your observations are terrific, because this is exactly the kind of feedback that's important to the design team as we're making this next round of iterations.
And is the intention to keep the art room and the music room open to the public side for concerts and exhibitions or exhibits, or?
It will be up to the district. Obviously, you could lock those classroom doors and not provide access to the internal components of them. But yes, the way this is currently designed, there would be the opportunity to have them accessible for those kinds of events from the public side without providing access to the classrooms themselves.
I just worry about band equipment.
So in this case, right, the instrumental storage, the instrumental classroom is as close to the stage as we can make it. It's actually in the upper right-hand corner of this illustration.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would likely be able to serve as a green room for the stage.
So that comes down to a matter of conditioning to keep that room locked.
Right.
So for the gym, is all of the bleacher seating going to be on the, what we see now as like the left side so that the stage can be incorporated.
Right, so we can certainly talk about that, but one of the things that came out of visioning was this spatial relationship between the gym, the stage, and the cafeteria, and to position the stage between the two so that you have a smaller, more intimate performance venue on the cafeteria side and a larger, less intimate performance venue on the gymnasium side. And if that's the case, then the logical position for any telescoping bleachers would be on the left-hand side of this drawing, all on one side. In fact, we've now taken the step of inserting some preliminary line work to illustrate sort of how big this gymnasium is. So what you're seeing in the dark line work there is a full-size high school court running in the north-south direction in the dark lines and offset so that if you were to have a competition basketball event, you would still have enough room to pull out some of those telescoping bleachers, even for a basketball game. And then you may not be able to see it on the light screen. Running in the other direction in this illustration, we have the same high school regulation cross-court line work showing that the width of the gym would allow full court basketball to happen on two courts simultaneously for youth sports or adult sports after hours and on weekends. Yes.
It isn't determined yet whether we will do a 6,000 square foot gym or a 1,200 square foot gym. You're anticipating in this design as a 12,000. What happens to the geometry if it isn't and it's meant to be a 6,000?
So a terrific question. In the case of this particular option, the public side has been designed in such a way that the middle can get narrower, right? We cut the gym in half, but then the custodial room, the boiler room, the kitchen, right? All of that just moves south, right? Then the administration, the nurse, the PT, right? All of that just moves north. And then what might happen is that the cafeteria gets squeezed out to the side to hit our requirements. It would be a slight redesign of the public side of the house for sure, but that's what would be necessary if the district ultimately chose to cut the size of the gymnasium in half.
And a follow-up to that, so what happens on the third floor where you need that space for instructional purposes?
We'll have to figure that out. We may have to change the shape of them. Right now, they're in a straight line. They may have to form a U, for example, with an extended learning space in the middle or some other arrangement like that to make that work.
Great questions. Christine.
The staff calf or lunchroom, is the expectation to put another one on the third floor as well? Because I recall from Tewksbury, they had 3 and they ended up using one as a swing room.
So in addition to this staff lunchroom, which could serve professional development, for example, we also have 6 teacher collaboration spaces that aren't the home base of anyone, but they're where data meetings can happen, where common planning time happens. We would expect those to also double as potential staff lunch locations based on staff members' choice. So we do have those scattered on all 3 floors and associated with each grade level grouping. So there, in practice, there will be multiple locations where staff lunch could occur. This just happens to be the only one that's labeled as such.
Just as a reference, how many staff for this configuration are we expecting?
I have to go back and double check that, but I think we're certainly north of 100 for sure, all in.
Okay.
All staff.
Okay.
120.
140 was 140.
And is that on the second floor, that staff lunchroom large enough as a capacity to hold all those teachers for a staff meeting, or you would use another space?
No. Unfortunately, we're trying to live within the MSBA guidelines for a space like this. So an all-staff meeting would have to take place in some place like the library or the cafeteria when you're having those professional development activities for a group that size.
If I can, just keep me on that for a moment. So those multi-purpose rooms that Jason's talking about, so 140 staff all in, but that's educational assistants, that's custodians, et cetera. But you'll recall that right now the current plan is to have 3 lunches. So you're going to have a lot of things happening simultaneously throughout the facility. So very easily in that kind of schedule, you would see some staff that would be meeting, for example, for a team meeting for individual education plan that might be 8, 10, 12 people. At the same time, there could be lunch going on. There could be another meeting going on. So there's a lot of activity that's going to be happening, not all at the same time, but dispersed throughout the course of the day. So see the absolute potential that those rooms will get utilized for different purposes. And the sheer, and we saw this in some of these tours, and those that went on the tours, certainly for a scope of the building of 800 plus or near 800 students. It's a large building, and so to have sort of that idea, one, say, staff lunchroom in one corner of the building would not be a great layout and would not be easily accessible for staff. David, have you got a question?
Yeah, I want to just come back to the stage for a bit. Can you talk about how the stage can service both the gym and the cafeteria, in particular the cafeteria, because it looks like there's a corridor.
Yes, so just a reading on the colors first. If you look closely, there's actually no black line around the green of the cafeteria. So even though there's a change in color, what we're trying to demonstrate for people like the local code officials, that there's a zone where we're likely to put furniture and a zone where we're likely to leave a clear path for things like egress. And so right now the stage is open to the cafeteria. There's no hard wall for sitting open on that side in the state of the current design. And so likewise, the sort of trapezoidal shape next to the servery is not an enclosed room. That's just another open environment to the rest of the cafeteria. The gym is a different story, where in other projects, we've used skyfold folding partitions to be both an acoustical and a physical barrier when that's in the closed position, when you're having a performance, let's say, or even lunch on the cafeteria side. And then if you had a performance on the gym side, you would have that be open and you would close off the visual to the cafeteria with a curtain device. Again, right, these are all architectural moves that we can discuss in a lot more detail if this were to be selected as a preferred alternative. We're just sort of testing, again, feasibility here, making sure we've got relationships right, and then whether or not there's a hard wall on the cafeteria side or a second folding partition, right? Those are all welcomed feedback, but also things that we can continue to discuss as the design moves forward.
Other questions from members of the committee, either here in person, and then we'll go to those that virtually at home. Christine.
Sorry, yeah, we are taking over. The library on the second floor. I know that personally, I've only been to the school library once when there's the book fair. Are there other events that are typically hosted in the library, and it being on the second floor away from that, is there anything else that we should consider? Is that the right spot?
It's up to you. In this particular design, Ryan, maybe you can point out the cascading stair. So there's a stair that connects the front door directly to the library. So in those kinds of events, right, it still can be a really close and convenient location. The elevator in this concept is located on the west side of the gym. So you would have to sort of walk around the gym to get to the elevator. And part of that has to do with, right, there is no third floor over the cafeteria. And if we wanted to provide an elevator right next to the library, then perhaps that might mean a second elevator. So again, we're trying to be cost conscious and be as efficient as possible without being inconvenient to events, for example, on the second floor. So that's the current state of this, where there's this convenience stair leading up to the library, but the elevator happens to be a little further away.
But can we, Glenn, to you, on a programming perspective, you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I was going to comment to that. Thank you. For a couple of reasons. First off, it would be seldom, and knowing how our buildings right now operate, it's seldom that there's an event that would happen in the core of the building. It's on very rare occasions that it does. And in the library, the only ones that I can think of is the book fair. Now, that said, when I think about our current configurations, it's really the library for the book fair. It's sort of the lone space because of the fact that in our current school configurations, there's not a lot of other options.
Oh, true.
I could see if this was the design to take shape, literally, figuratively, I could see other options for something like that. I think all of that said, there are maybe occasions, and there was just last week, for example, at the Shawsheen where I was there, where there were in-classroom demonstrations of student work. Those are rare, but there's always a plan that can unfold to help support that with access for visitors in a controlled manner. So, but I think the spaces that in such a more modern or contemporary design like this will afford more opportunities to bring those kind of activities to the main level where you can have better oversight and control.
Okay. To add to that, like in my experience, the media center library, as we affectionately call it, on the second floor doesn't cause for any alarm. A lot of it does happen to be so that it's more of the student use area. Or is the intention to have a glass interior wall so that light can penetrate from outside into the corridor? Is it, I know you're not there fully yet, but is a wall separating the hallway to the media library area intended to be glass?
Is
Is it like this?
Glazing, yeah.
Again, we haven't discussed interior finishes yet. I think what we can say is that this does set itself up well to have what we might call a storefront material to put the library on display from the interior, at least in that right-hand most portion that's facing that stair and the sort of cafeteria beyond. So it has sort of that storefront, window front experience. But we haven't really talked about what those finishes and where those visual connections would really be yet.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure, before we come back to David, is there anyone who is on the committee at home watching that has a question? I just want to make sure you have an opportunity to ask as well. Questions for the design team on their current work?
Don't see any hands currently.
David?
So previously in some of the early iterations, we were, in addition to the main entrance, talking about also a secondary drive-up entrance for pre-K and for certain services. I know you talked a little bit about like at the nurse station, like you pointed out earlier. Do we still are thinking about like a separate pre-KK drive-up in that corner?
Yeah, so where Ronnie's cursor is a formal pre-K entry. And adjacent to that, we have what we might call the pre-K2 administrator, an assistant principal, or an office space immediately adjacent to that to help manage that front door. And depending on how the site circulation finally shakes out, we would expect there to be either dedicated parking for pre-K where they could walk their children to this door, or a location in the site drop-off loop for the littles, where it would be a really short travel distance from parent vehicles to this front door.
Okay. And in the narrowing that you described from PDB design to what we're looking at right now, can you quantify how much outside that's capturing and what? So you mentioned wetlands, that there's going to be less encroachment there, but is this going to like put more parking space on it? Is it going to just like free up better circulation? Like, what do you think are the consequences?
Yeah.
Like, how much are we capturing outside?
That's what you want to talk about that?
So I was gonna say, so we don't have it overlaid here, but on this plan, if you look at the current footprint of the PDP plan, when we started to overlay and compare the two, if we use this north edge as the hardest edge, it would probably bring you to almost the extended learning area. And so this road would then move up north, and so you would actually have out of the, you potentially could be out of the full buffer zone, but you might encroach on just the outer buffer zone a little bit of the wetlands. And then, circulation would have more opportunity for, a larger turning radius potentially, or, how far we have to go around the building. We did have a meeting with the police and fire departments. And so there was a lot of feedback that they gave on, how close the road could potentially be for their apparatus to reach the building, for example, things like that. So all of that would come into play as we start to lay this out a little bit more. But you definitely have more space, both on the south side, potentially of the building, to work through that circulation and moving.
And potentially parking for preschool on that side.
Right. And can you walk through just one more time, because it's been, I think like months since we went through this, the circulation of where buses and parents go in this design?
Sure. So buses come here from the south side, and they would enter in and follow to the left and move around the building. And then this would be the drop zone closest to the cafeteria, and then they would exit out on Ballardvale. The cars could come in and they have the option to loop through and drop off at the front of the building and exit back out at the same entrance. There is the potential of looping, if we have more of a queue that we have talked about in meetings, of looping through the parking lot, and then either exiting out or looping through the parking lot, and then being able to drop off here or up here, and then be able for students to cross over in the pedestrian way over to the entrance. So depending on how that works out, we've looked at multiple scenarios, and then we'll develop that further here.
We've had some conversations, as Ronnie mentioned, with the public safety officials and some follow-up conversations with even our landscape architect and civil engineering consultants. And given the reduction in the footprint that we have just observed, there may be opportunities to rethink how some of that circulation works to create longer queues for parent vehicles, particularly in the afternoon, and better separation between buses and parent vehicles. Things like potentially having buses come in off of Ballardvale and do a loop on the hardscape play area to the west of the building, and then go back out, so that there's absolutely no crossover between parent vehicles and buses. But we just haven't made it to that level of iteration on the site yet. We're still trying to get the building itself squeezed down first, and then we'll place it on the site and revisit some of those parking and site circulation issues for an update in the future.
And we did also talk about having a completely separate drive just for the buses if they were to use the entrance from the south coming in, and so they wouldn't even be passing the parent in the vehicles. So there's, still that will also be another option to be studied in this iteration.
Any other questions for the design?
Green space. We still have an interior courtyard.
We would still have a three-sided courtyard, and it's important to differentiate that from sort of what you have here at the high school as a completely enclosed courtyard. Three-sided courtyard, it's easier to maintain, easier to access. And then on the site plan, we would still have some field space between the main parking lot and the building itself. And by shrinking the footprints of these concepts, right, that only improves the quality and quantity of green space available to us.
So I think before we were going to move on to schedule update agenda number 5. I think the key takeaways.
Yeah, Glenn, we've got one.
Oh, sorry. All right, go to the pre-K. Then I'll give my son. All right.
So as a reminder, this is the pre-K 3 new construction at the Woodburn Street site. So this is what we submitted at the PVP submittal. And we have the footprint of the existing building where the parking lot is shown. And the building would be on the north end of the site. It would appear to be a one-story building for those at the front east side of the site, and only on the west side of the site would you see that it was actually the 2-story. And so we have maintained you want me to actually go over the circulation while we're here? Would that be helpful? So the parents would loop through the parking lot, and the buses would come through and use this back loop. And then also a pre-K entrance would have a loop of their own for drop off directly for the pre-K.
Would it just be drop off or parking as well?
So there is parking that we've shown here as well. So they do have that option. So this is the refined plan. Again, if we were to overlay them, you would see that there's definitely some tightening that's happened here with the refined lines. Administration is still at the front of the building. This is your main entry. So the nurse flanks the left side, and administration flanks the right side of the main entrance. You have OT and PT, and then you have your specials, the art and music and flex spaces. The gym is central. And you would have a cafeteria, and the stage would still be between the cafeteria and the gymnasium space. The kitchen is on the northeast corner here. You would have your custodial maintenance, and if you remember from the site plan, this is where the loading dock and deliveries would take place. This becomes your public side of the building. And one difference here from the pre-K-5 option is that the media center is now placed here in the central zone, so it's part of that main entry. But what you will see when I show you the lower level is that it becomes a 2-story space. On this floor, we have 3 of the grades 1, 2, and 3, and they do create what appears to be a courtyard, but when we get to the lower level, you'll see that this classroom wing actually cantilevers over the lower outdoor space. This is that lower level. Here you have the pre-K wing on the south side, and then the kindergarten wing on the north side, and the media library space is that 2-story space that serves in this kind of connector. We also have staff dining right here centrally located. So that's it's still located next to the media center, but it's actually closer to the classroom wings and more central. Again, the extended learning areas are kind of split up around the central core, and it's slightly different from the pre-K-5, but I started to identify those locations with the lighter blue color. In this option, you still kind of have that extended area off of the corridor space, so it's one larger space for most of the wings, as opposed to kind of being separated a little bit, but they are all still sprinkled around to have some privacy and connection with the adjacent classrooms. So this option is the 2 stories. So there's 2 stories to be developed, and we will be coming back with the site plan in the next meeting. And just as a reminder, this dashed line here, this is the footprint of that upper level of the core, and then this would be that classroom view that is above.
So that section is actually down in the lacrosse field.
Correct.
Yes.
So I'm not sure if I get it. So the second floor basically provides a roof to the first floor courtyard?
For a portion of it.
Okay.
Or you could almost imagine it as a bridge, right? So it's actually hovering over the bus drop-off lane, could be covered play when it's not being used for bus transportation. And again, it allows the courtyard to be open-sided at the ground for maintenance, for ease of use. And then it keeps grades 1, 2, and 3 all together on the same floor, rather than stacking a third floor, isolating someone. So it's not the sort of ideal solution from an exterior building envelope point of view, but it actually appears to be working really nicely from an educational view and keeping all of those upper grades together on one floor, and has the added advantage of presenting as a 1-story building, as Ronnie mentioned, to the neighbors and to the adjacent streets.
One of the other nice features is it also provides a covered play area for rainy weather or inclement weather, where kids can still get outside, depending on the treatment of the flooring, or whether it's grass or some sort of hardscape for play.
Question, have you guys started looking into where potential addition can be placed for growth?
Yeah, so that is actually a requirement that the MSBA has of all concepts in the PSR phase. And so we will be looking at that. It's a little easier in the pre-K 5 and 1 because of where we've located and how we've located stairs. You could place as many as 2 classrooms per floor on each one of those 2 fingers and have 6 classrooms added onto each finger relatively easily. This, as a donut on the upper floor, is a little harder, but that is part of our challenge in this phase, is to identify places where the building could be added onto in the future.
And that's kind of what triggered my question. It's like, I don't know how the building fits on the site visually, but like, where would you add to it?
Yeah, this one is a little bit more challenging. Just the site itself presents challenges with the grade circulation to make it work.
So I think you said that the library media center is a 2-story.
space in
It's
the
a two-story
pre-K.
space.
Correct,
So that's not like the pre-K through 5, right?
correct.
Pre-K through 5 is one. What's the advantage to designing it that way here rather than just having another room that you can use on the upper or lower floor?
Yeah, so let's be clear about what we mean. In the pre-K 5 scenario, all of the program is on the same level, but is likely a more than 1-story volume of space. In other words, it's a slightly higher ceiling than you might see in a conventional classroom, but there's no additional floor at the upper level. In the pre-K 3, when we say it's a 2-story space, what we mean is there's actually program elements on both floors. And so the advantage of that is that everybody has access to library on their floor, where in the pre-K 5, right, it's only on the second floor that the library square footage exists.
So one of the advantages of this also is you would have the collections that would be geared towards the pre-K potentially on the lower level. And then the materials for the upper grades could potentially be placed on that main level. And so they would be easily accessible. You know, we haven't gotten that far into the detail of how that will break up, but typically the material would be placed adjacent to the grade levels that would be entering out those areas. So
Do you need 2 staff then?
It depends on how it's designed. If there's very little visual connection between the upper portion and the lower portion, perhaps. If there's a strong visual connection between them, perhaps not. We have just opened an elementary school in Westwood where it has exactly this expression where there's some library square footage on the second floor, but most of it is on the first floor. But because there's such a strong visual connection between the two, an adult standing on the first floor can actually see bodies upstairs from down below. And so, right, the devil is in the details in that way.
the other programmatic element that we have is the STE room. So if that is on the levels and then the collections are on the other level, it would still be monitored by one librarian. So she or he or they would be available with the class that's in the space at the time, which would alleviate the need for 2 staff members.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my elementary school library actually worked that way. There was a central area that's sort of the bottom floor, and then almost a balcony ringing around, but with rooms and other spaces, but you could really see almost everything.
Yeah, so when we talk about this open courtyard space, I always think of buildings I've been involved with before, where if you build stuff, every office or classroom over a boiler room has always got radiant floor heating because of the heat underneath. I'm talking about an open space like this, and there'll be plumbing and everything else with it. You worry about the cold coming through and those floors being cold, which gives people the appearance that the room is in as warm as it is because it's pulling through. So how do you, I know it's early stages, but what is done to prevent that? Because like I said, you go to the athletic director's office, it's always 5 degrees warmer, maybe sometimes 10 than everywhere else. And then you go to the police station where it has an overhang. And in the cold part of the winter, those floors are freezing in those classrooms. Those offices get cold. So as good as it sounds like an overhang of an area to play, it could create internal issues.
It certainly complicates the exterior building envelope, and we'll have to think about what the insulation looks like and how much insulation in that that soffit condition, that ceiling condition that's under the floor in that location. And it may need to be treated much like you would treat a roof, right? If hot air rises, you may want to put more insulation under that thing than you might do on a vertical surface. But again, that's part of the design that we haven't quite made it to yet, but certainly you're right about that. It would have to be treated very carefully as to not create the condition that you're describing, where there's a different environmental experience, temperature experience for the bridge compared to something that's more conventional construction.
Especially you're running off similar air handlers because you're trying to achieve different things.
Yeah, again, we haven't made it into the level of detail of rooftop units or air handling units yet, but when we have classroom space north or south, typically they want to have their own rooftop unit because the solar heat gain is very different based on the orientation. And the bridge happens to face east and west, which is a completely different solar orientation. So it's likely that would have its own rooftop unit and maybe could help manage its differences from the building envelope point of view, because its solar rotation also happens to be different than the other parts of the plan.
It actually speaks to kind of something I was wondering about the difference between the 3.5 and 3.3 buildings. The second floor of the 3.5 building seems to have quite a bit of roof as compared to the second floor of this one. I was just wondering what the thinking was there. I know we're going back a step, but it only became apparent to me looking at this one. I was just wondering why there was not a thought to expand the second floor there to like the walls of the first floor as much.
So with all of our concepts, we're endeavoring to make things stack as much as we can. If you think about the building we're in,
Yep.
right, the classrooms are the same shape, same geometry on every floor. And in both concepts, we've done that reasonably well for the academic wing. But on the public side, we've got, strange spaces like the cafeteria or administration where we've managed to stack the library on top of it because they're about the same square footage. But we don't really have enough program to take classrooms off of the third floor and try to put them on top of the cafeteria, for example.
Sure.
In some of our early sketches, we did look at that as a strategy, but it produced more building envelope and it produced longer travel distances and sort of resulted in some less attractive spatial relationships. And so I think we found that, stacking just the academic wing, thinking about that as an element, and then trying to stack the public element side, that became the most rational way to resolve all of the things that we're trying to manage here. Does that respond to your question?
Kind of. I guess I was just curious, like, never mind. I think
We also have grading on this location.
right. No, I was actually speaking about the prior one.
Right, it felt like there was a lot of roof there on the
Yeah, that's
public
what I was
side.
saying. I was curious. This one seems to have less on the second floor. So I was wondering if the solar side of it.
So in all fairness, right, what you're not seeing in the pre-K 3 illustrations is what the roof looks like over the public side, since it's all one story, right? You'd actually have quite extensive roof over the first floor and only the sort of underhang of the roof at the lower level. So in that way, they're very similar. That the public side is essentially one story in both concepts.
Okay.
When we talked about the pre-K to 5 in the library specifically, we talked about like book fairs and the possibility for public use. Can you address the 2-story library here and related to security? Is there an entrance to the library from that lower level? And if not, if it's only from the second level, is there secure doors on that lower level?
And maybe you can point out where the security threshold is.
So on this main level, you see that there's a doorway here and then a doorway here.
Yeah.
So that's the secure thresholds on the main level. And then when you go to the lower level, it's in the same spot.
Right, so
Here and then right here.
So in other words, you could provide public access to the library on both levels and still not provide access to any classrooms, right? Because of where those security thresholds have been located, and people would still be able to egress out of the building through the stairwells that are flanking the library on both floors.
And then on this level, because it will egress to grade, there are exits as well.
It's next to the toilet rooms. Yeah, right there. Yep.
And are those entrances above and below or next to the library? Is that the pre-K and K entrance or is?
So this would be.
That's
The pre-K entry.
Okay.
Yep. And that little teal space next to it is again the pre-K 2 administrator office.
Thank you. Other questions on the pre-K 3?
In the gym in this one, it's 6,000 square feet.
6,000 square feet. So when we visually think about what the pre-K 5 might look like with a 6,000 square foot gym, this gives you some sense of how narrow that public would become if you had a smaller gymnasium in that concept.
As a comparison, is the current Woburn Street gym 6,000?
No.
We know about 4,000.
Okay. Okay, I'm trying to envision the scale with the number of children for cares and whatnot, so.
This gym is a 12,000 square foot gym here at high school.
Yeah.
Would be slightly larger.
The middle school, I think, is just over 6.
I don't have that number memorized, but you could be right.
I remember on top of my head, but I thought it was.
We don't see any hands.
Okay. So then moving on to the schedule, an update on that. Item number 5.
So we are finishing up May here, so I revised this to indicate that we have refined the pre-K 5 N1 and pre-K 5, pre-K 3 N1. We'll continue to work on those with some of the feedback that we've heard. We had a meeting earlier today that included the administrators of the different schools and some of the directors, and so we'll continue to take that feedback and continue to refine and bring that back to you next month. We also had the public safety meeting this month, and received a lot of really good feedback from the police and fire, and they were really appreciative of being brought in on this early phase to start the conversations. And we've moved sustainability towards next month because we are still working through these plans, and once we have that more firm, we can start talking about what the changes and impacts may be as we move into continuing for cost estimating in June.
Also, in June, we will be meeting with the senior center. We have made contact with them, and we have a plan to go over and do a presentation.
That's right, and that will have to be June 11th, June 11th.
Yes. So can you just, if we're sticking at this for a moment, July to August, there's a whole lot happening in the next few months, but can you just remind the committee around, we've got broadly speaking, August as we know the community forum, but we know the selection of the preferred option and the submission to PSR. So can you just remind our committee really where it is that we're honing in on making the need to, apply that evaluation matrix and then make that decision such that your team has enough time to then get this package together and submit it to the MSBA?
Sure. So next month, we will have all of the options brought to you at the end of June. And alongside that, we will also be preparing the cost estimating package that will be sent to the estimator. July will be focused on cost estimating. So at that point, we've handed off all of the information, and we'll be working with the committee for evaluating or refining the evaluation matrix. One of the things, we had a lot of criteria in our evaluation matrix last time or in the last round, and a lot of the criteria had the same score. And so it really didn't make a difference in which option was going to move forward. So we're going to go through a process of refining that and really honing in on what the priorities are to help differentiate between the remaining options. And by the end of July, we will fill out that evaluation matrix. We should have our cost estimates back to prepare and share with you. And then in August, we will have a community forum where we present all of the information to the public, have time for them to provide their feedback using Mentimeter. We'll leave that open so that we can bring that information back to you in the August meeting. And at that August meeting, we'll have that final evaluation matrix with the cost, with the impacts, and feedback from the community forum to consider. And then we'll look to make a vote at that time. So, and then throughout this process, we will be developing all of this material is prepared as to be part of the PSR package that will go to the MFPA in August. But by the end of August, we will have to take a vote on the preferred option.
When is the submission date to the MSBA?
August 29th.
Thanks, Ronnie. Any questions on the schedule, David?
So it's not listed there, but I'm assuming we'll also get refinement on the third floor of pre-K through 5 and 1 in June with the other options.
Yeah.
Do we have a date narrowed for the forum number 4?
In August.
Yeah.
We did not finalize the date, did we yet?
I thought we.
It would be great if by July 4th festival, if we have that to speak to it and advertise that that's coming up.
Actually, maybe I stand corrected.
I think we did August 8th.
I thought we set a preliminary date, but might not have been
I
confirmed.
believe it was August 8th. It's not on our calendar yet. I believe it was leaning towards due to when our submission. Yes,
Thursday, August the
I
8th.
believe that's, I think you're correct.
My apologies. So Thursday, August the 8th. With, unless there's anything further on the schedule, I'd like to add in a new and truly unanticipated item tonight before we go into the working group. You know that based upon that schedule, obviously in April was a key month for the milestone of submitting the information to MSBA. Well, we, the interim town manager or temporary town manager, received correspondence from the MSBA on Friday, literally Friday afternoon before the long weekend, with feedback on the submission and the entire package. So there's a lot of information received just as we were heading into the long weekend. Here we are Tuesday after. We've had a little bit of a chance to digest it and had a further follow-up conversation earlier today with the folks here to my right, your left, with MSBA, and Paul and I joined the call. So there is some timely information here that we have to process and we want to bring to the committee. Timely in the sense that they provided us with 14 days. 14 calendar days to sort of digest the information that was shared with us and then in turn have to respond. So we have a pretty tight window here. But I'll turn over to Julie or Jason or Ronnie to speak a little bit more about what we need to entertain and consider tonight.
so as Dr. Brand said, we received a response late on Friday afternoon. We took some time to review it. And we had some questions for the MSBA, so we decided to jump on a call with them to ask them a few of the key questions that we had, just what we wanted clarification on. As everyone has seen, and we've talked over the last month or so about the 5 shortlisted options that we have, which would be the base renovation for the Wildwood School, the addition renovation at North.
The new construction.
I'm trying to say the letters in my head. New construction at North. And what am I missing?
So pre-K 5 new at North, pre-K 3 new at Woburn, and pre-K K new at Wildwood.
Okay, so in addition to those, the MSBA has requested, so when we do a base renovation for the Wildwood School, which basically brings it up to code, they are also asking us to do the same exercise for the Woburn Street and for the North Intermediate. That doesn't mean that the schools would be able to be used as with a base renovation for a pre-K to 5 in the North Intermediate, but they want that for cost comparison purposes only.
And so we have included that. So technically we have 7, but because we keep talking about the 5, so for the pre-K 3 at Woburn, the repair only, we know that the pre-K and K population would not fit into that building. But because we refer to it as pre-K 3, it was just, I think it was more of a clarification. So we do have that information already prepared, but it's just formally saying that we are carrying that forward.
So what they've asked us to do, in addition to the fact that we were already carrying those 3 base repairs, they've also asked us to carry an addition renovation at each school. So the 2, in addition, we were already carrying an addition renovation for the pre-K 5. So they're asking us to carry an addition renovation for the pre-K K. And then for pre-K 3, and there's 2 options. Now, we're asking you as a community, as this governing body, to make the decision on which one we should include. Just as a point of order, there's literally cost-wise, not much difference. So the cost difference for the pre-K 3 AR1, which is the one on the top of your screen, was between 135 and 149 million. That's just the rough estimate. And then the addition renovation 2 at the bottom of your screen was 130 to 144 million. So they're really right in the same ballpark. They're only asking us to carry this for cost comparison only. It's not to necessarily be a choice for you to move forward with. It's just so that every option, whether it's a renovation, an addition renovation, and the one new school option, that is what they're asking of us.
What's one versus two?
So,
Site or?
yeah, so it is the site. So pre-K 3 AR1 is the top image, and that is at the Bird Street site. The biggest, and then pre-K 3 AR2 is at the Wildwood site. The biggest difference is that the Woburn Street site is an occupied site, but it is also a larger site. And then the pre-K 3 AR2 at Wildwood is an unoccupied site. However, it is a smaller site for consideration. So we don't have to consider both. So that's kind of why we're here asking, you know, what's the preference to carry to the next, through this next phase?
So just to clarify if I can, so this is really a compliance exercise, so to speak. But it's, Julie, is ROPM's your recommendation that this committee should take action on this and vote?
Based on our conversation with the MSBA today, yes, they are requesting that we comply with this direction.
Questions on this?
So which creates less work for us and is possibly a more accurate cost comparison if that's the whole reason we're doing it.
Questions, yes.
I would think that AR.1, since if we choose to go with any of the sites, they would be an occupied site versus an unoccupied site at the Wildwood, that it would be nice to have that kind of a cost comparison carried forward or phased in some regards.
The thoughts? Yes. Again, respectfully, we know that you're just receiving this. It's, we wish it weren't so, but it is, and we have that tight, fairly tight turnaround that we need to get back to them on. So, if there's a comfort level to make a decision on this tonight, we certainly could. In the absence of that, I unfortunately would see the need to call another meeting. But
I mean, it's not anchoring any decisions for us,
Yeah.
so I don't think we should beat a dead horse, right?
Right.
sorry, Craig?
No, I mean, if they're, not so subtly directing us to do this, I think we need to, but were these scored as previously? I don't recall. And which one
Yes, they were.
scored higher?
They were about the same. I thought.
Yeah, good question. We can have that handy.
Well, the Wildwood probably scored higher because it's vacant, but for all the reasons you stated.
But the
Doesn't make
Wildwood
Wildwood
might
site.
have, site scored higher, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the Woburn one didn't score equally high because of the circulation and the site logistics around it and the play area versus the Wildwood, where it's a smaller actual footprint.
We think we can access the scores. Do we?
Yeah, we're.
Okay.
Yeah, he's looking at it. We'll see.
While we're looking, does anybody else have any questions?
I don't even know you sharing that stuff, right?
Sure.
Is this why that the repair cost was not listed as one of the options as far as pushing forward?
So we previously understood the MSBA to require, as we talked about with this group, a repair option, a renovation, an addition option, and a new construction option holistically, and then at least one of something for each of the three grade configurations. And in their comments, they sort of changed our understanding of their position that they wanted an addition, renovation, and a new construction for every grade configuration. So we did have the pre-K, K repair only option evaluated in our list. In fact, we had the other two repair options in our list also, but knowing that they were never viable solutions, we didn't consider carrying them forward because they're not viable solutions. The MSBA has simply asked us to continue to carry those forward so that they have a record of what the cost of those would be as freestanding repair projects. Is that what you were asking, David?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should be up on screen, but probably not on your screen. The pre-K to 3 AR.1 scored a 62.8, and the pre-K to 3 AR.2 scored a 62.5.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Lee.
My recommendation would still be the one that has a occupied site, just so that we can understand cost wise, if it's for just cost comparisons.
So the recommendation for a vote again, Julie, how would you suggest to frame it here?
That's a good question. So Vivian, if I heard you correctly, you're recommending that we vote for the Woburn Street site, so that would be pre-K 3 AR1. So I think Vivian makes that motion.
So moved.
Second. Okay, so we have a motion, a discussion. Roll call.
Any discussions?
Again, this is to fulfill their requirement, not what
Yes.
we were.
Correct.
asking for.
Cost purposes only.
This motion is to add this option to our list of alternatives to further develop in the PSR phase.
We have to add the other one too.
We do, but the other one's not in question. So I think this is the only one that has to be voted on.
Okay, if we could roll call, please.
Diane Allen,
Yes.
Glenn Brand,
Yes.
Alice Brown LeGrand,
Yes.
Michael Camosio,
Yes.
Justin Couche,
Yes.
Christine Holleran,
Yes.
Dennis Kelly,
Yes.
Paul Melorani,
Yes.
Christine Pendergast. Yes. David Ragsdale,
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero,
Yes.
Stacy Scott,
Yes.
Nick Bolton,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience as we work through that, and for your understanding. We'll move on to item number 6, which is the working group updates, public relations working group.
Sure, I'll give an update. So we've been working the last couple of weeks primarily focused on Fund Fourth, because you know we reserved a table. And that is set up for Wednesday, June 26th through the Sunday, June 30th. And there's a requirement that we maintain coverage at that table throughout. So right now the table's slated to be set up. We've talked as a group, we have a tent, we have a table, some chairs. We're gonna be set up near where the other community groups sell, some of the churches and the sports leagues. We've created a sign-up genius to try and get the coverage for that setup, primarily 2 to 3 hour windows of time. I was going to send that out after this meeting to everybody on this committee. We've already sent it out to the public relations work group, tried it out. We're requesting 2 members, ideally 2 members from the school building committee at each time session. I've also created a session for other community members that if there's other interested parties in town who want to join and assist at the table. We can, if there's a lot of interest, we can add additional spots, but I think the goal is to try and get two people for each session, and ideally everyone on the committee can at least find one time that works for them, so we can help get coverage.
Great. Thank you for your work and consideration of that. So next step, sign up genius. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll send that out to everyone on the committee who hasn't already received an invite. And I'll send an email to everyone once that goes out so that you look for it. Sometimes it gets intercepted by your various spam filters wherever you put it. This is an automated email that comes out from them.
Fantastic. Any questions or comments on that? Coming up fast and furious here.
From a media perspective, we're leveraging poster boards that are already created. We'll be using a Mentimeter that the team has been helping us with. We decided against TVs and videos due to being out in the elements. So keeping it simple, but lots of interaction.
And we're hoping to garner as many participants as possible leading up to the August timeframe and for the evaluation criteria in order to narrow it down to the one preferred. Hoping to get as many input from community constituents as possible to help guide this committee to making the decision, an informed decision.
I believe also a generous member of the working group has offered to donate a banner. And that has been, a rough design has been put together, for that. So I believe, that is a work in progress. They're also looking for, kind of some ideas on what they can present at the table, kind of to get people to come.
Thank you, Julie. We did toss out ideas of having festive 4th of July pom-pom stickers. So that way, since this is a school event, attracting students and therefore the parents come along with them in order to entice them to take the interactive survey. But we're still looking at funding for those in order to make it a reality.
So the pom-pom thing come up a couple times. And I go back to, my daughter's 32 now, but when she was little, we went every single solitary year. They gave you the Frisbee with the hot dog and chips on it. And I couldn't tell you in all the years we went, who was on that Frisbee ever. So I had suggested in one of the meetings, Julie said, give out candy or whatever, but you want people to go on to take the survey. So if there were 15 or 20 full backpacks for new school years for kids, and if you went on, you were eligible to win a raffle, I think that would be something people would use more than, like I said, the pom-poms, I don't think an adult's going to scan it. I think it's going to end up in a car or in a box in a yard or whatever.
Okay, we think that idea is probably dead. From a cost perspective, actually, it's pretty expensive. We tossed around we really did discuss the backpacks and there being a raffle. And it turns out there's a little bit more red tape around it that we care to pursue for this. So, yeah.
I'd just like to suggest that I think that we could probably get a few more school committee members besides me next to sign up for slots.
And just so you know, we are preparing talking points for everybody. Every person who's at that booth will have the same talking points, the pros and the cons. So nobody will be flying blind.
Yeah, and I also mentioned the school committee, of course, because they're more up to speed than the typical member of this committee.
Thank you for that.
I would just like to say that, talking points, anything that's being presented, needs to be approved by this committee before, we take it on the end of July. So I think the meeting is scheduled for
June 20th.
June 20. Yeah, so right before. So I just want to make sure that we're
okay. But Julie, you can at least draft those with us so that we get 99% of the way there and there shouldn't be anything contentious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jason.
You mentioned that you're planning to use some graphic elements that have already been created with this new news about the MSBA, knowing that concepts are going to be updated maybe in time for 4th of July, maybe not in time. I guess I'm asking whether or not you need additional graphic support based on some of the more recent information that's come to light.
Like the same 5 options, the boards that are outside, see them outside the gym. It's the same 5 options. The additional options are for cost comparison only, so I don't think that you need to
Well,
update those. But they're still out.
okay, yeah, I mean, we should talk about that because all of these options the MSB has added to the list still have to go through the evaluations process, are still legitimate options that could get selected. And we don't want to run the risk of someone perceiving that we're intentionally leaving anything out when we're communicating options to the public. So we got to think through that.
Yeah, we could
carefully.
take the.
We may need to update the Mentimeter from the 5 questions to 7, I think then, so where the questions we're looking at right now, are pretty straightforward, basic information. It's, are you a resident? Do you currently have school age children or relatives in the school system? And that's really a yes, no, in the future, not old enough, so we get a little bit of demographics without too much detail. Are you in favor of school consolidation? Yeah, and then the 4th questions are ranked the options being considered. So I think it's very easy to just add in 2 options. And then the last question, because I think there's some debate here still, is about the MSBA, the size gym they'll fund. And then do we want to consider a high school size gym and one option? So I think maybe I can email Sarah and
Yeah, updating the Mentimeter with an additional set of choices around options is a relatively easy thing to do. I guess I was thinking about if the boards only have the current short list of options on it, that would need to be updated to include now these additional options that the MSBA has forced us to include in the list.
Yeah, and I think we can.
And we can certainly do that. I'm just making sure that that's the correct thing to do.
Can we consider crafting it in a cost comparison manner?
Yeah, I mean, so this is the current board as it is out in the hallway, and I think we could tweak this a little bit to add those additional options.
Right, but I would think that you would want to treat them all equally, so you have site plans for each, you have a description of each, right?
Okay.
We'd be concerned that we would treat
Yeah, we can
them.
have one.
Yeah.
So can I just recap, because we just talked about a few things here. In preparation for the July 4th festivities, the generation of talking points that will be taking a lead, Julie, by yourself, but ultimately we'll come back to this committee to vote and approve on June 25th. But in addition, we're really talking about any other materials that we're going to have. We anticipate to have on that table. They should be vetted through this committee and approved as well too.
Correct. Any material that is provided at that table needs to be approved by this committee before it is published.
One of the things that I'm thinking about, and we can talk more with the leadership group, is the existing condition study information as well. This will be one of our last opportunities to get that information out to the community, I think, to best understand, not one of the last, but an important opportunity to also understand the state of the state, the graphical representation there that you're talking about in the imaging. So it's a bit of some packaging. We have a little bit of time to do so, but to be reminded that it should flow through this committee on that June 25th meeting. Okay. Thank you for all of your collective thinking on that. We'll look for that, the invitation to help join in the shifts. You'll have the times laid out for when the fair is open or the fun on the 4th is open. So certainly appreciate folks' consideration to get involved in that. Shifting to item number 7 tonight, discussion, correspondence, new items. Is there anything that folks wanted to raise here tonight, or those who are at home? Okay. Committee questions is our 8th item tonight on the agenda. Any questions that we have not discussed this evening?
I have a question.
Okay. Yes, Sal.
Diane Allen.
Yes, Diane. Hi, go ahead.
How are you? And this may be premature, but has there been any indication of how much MSBA is going to contribute to the project?
Yes, we have had conversations with the MSBA regarding what our reimbursement rate is. However, not every space in the building is eligible, or I should say on the property, is eligible for reimbursement. So as part of this process, we are going to, by August, narrow down to that one preferred option. And then in the following 8 months, I believe, when we get to town vote, right before that, we do a form with the MSBA called a Project Scope and Budget Agreement. And that document is has a lot of moving parts to it, and MSBA guidelines tell you that the size of a classroom can be no less than 900 square feet and no more than, I think, 950. So if you chose to have a classroom at, say, 975 square feet, 25 of that is now become ineligible. And so this form kind of breaks it all out to show you what's eligible and what's ineligible. So today, I can't tell you how much the MSBA would contribute to this project because of those ineligible costs, which is why Dorian Whittier, had, when they showed that first iteration of the new pre-K-5, it was, rather large, and they've kind of narrowed that down. They're trying to keep us within the confines of the MSBA's guidelines for each individual room. Now, there will be things that the school, like the gym, if people really wish to have a high school sized gym, that's over and above what the MSBA would reimburse. So those are the things that we're trying to narrow down between now and say next April when we meet with the MSBA.
A lot more complicated than I thought.
I don't think that was very helpful, Diane, but that's really how the process goes.
I mean, it's going to be hard to, I think, make people understand, especially at a town meeting. We're building a public school, and there are going to be spaces in there that may not be eligible for reimbursement. It's got to be clearly defined why not.
Right, and that's some of the things that we will, bring to people's attention, whether it's additional spaces for teachers, for, breakout spaces, or, the CARES program, that's a good one, thank you. That's not a reimbursable space, but it's something that the town needs and is a program that they use daily here.
But it goes back to that video, the answer isn't a percentage right now, it's tens of millions of dollars of funding. I think that's the message that has to be continually said. Is even though we're on a percentage, it's tens of millions, which really helps to take the stress out of the number. I think anyway.
Yeah, and Dan, I would offer sort of two additional things. One is we feel like the design team has been charged with designing the smallest building possible that will meet your educational needs. And that will include some things that you don't currently have in your existing buildings because your existing buildings aren't fully meeting the needs of your students. And then the second thing I would say is that there are lots of costs just because of how the MSBA works that will be deemed ineligible that aren't space related in any way.
Right.
An example of that is abatement of asbestos tile, right? When we go to knock down whatever building we're going to knock down, the MSBA won't contribute anything to the cost of removing asbestos tile, right? Because that's something that they deem ineligible. They will only pay for a certain amount of site work, and we're going to have parking, and we're going to have drainage, and we're going to have fields, right? That are all part of what the district needs, but they're going to likely be well beyond what the MSBA will contribute from a site perspective. And so it's important to know that these ineligible costs, part of them are just simply by how the MSBA formulas work, and they have really nothing to do with whether it's a space inside the building or not.
Correct.
Okay, I have a second question. The land that's going to be used or potentially could be used for the North Intermediate School site, which would be the pre-K through 5. That piece of land, do you, prior to making a plan there, have to do any testing on that site plan to make sure that there isn't any contamination in that soil, and that the land is buildable. Just because it's got fields, right now, before any process takes place,
Yes.
when does, and if so, when does that happen?
So yes, we definitely will be doing testing on the site. We are waiting for us to have one site, so that we can do a detailed survey, do traffic study, do geotechnical analysis, geoenvironmental assessments of the soil. We will be looking at all of that. Once we select one option at the end of this phase, so that will be part of the schematic design phase, which is the next phase. And then from there, that would help, as for the design team, it'll help us define that we've placed the building in the correct location, or if we might have to shift it, for example. If there are some unknown conditions that we need to adapt to or design around. So all of that will be taken into consideration at the beginning of schematic design.
Or if that's the location that we've chosen, how much remediation would be required if we decided to stay in that location?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Diane. Any other questions from members of the committee? Okay, seeing none. Item number 9 is public comment. We do have, for those of you that are at home, we have a few folks here who are in attendance tonight. Any public comments tonight? Thanks for being here, though. We do have one.
You want to go up here or back here?
Sure.
Don't like there.
Stop very loud.
Yeah, I can do that. First off, I want to say thank you to everyone on the committee. I've only
Name.
oh, sorry, Scott Neville, 215 Chestnut Street. Thank you to everyone on the committee. Thank you all for volunteering your time. This is an enormous decision that you will be making. I know it's not lost on any of you, but this will be setting up the town's direction for 50 years. This decision that we're going to make in August is enormous. I'm seeing what's upcoming in the future meetings for June and July. I saw evaluation matrix on there. Very happy to see that, because my question coming in here tonight was, what do the committee members need to help them make their decision? We've seen great presentations, the layouts, the schools, the sites, but we haven't heard a lot of discussion about how the committee members are going to make their decision. So I think that I'm very happy to see that there. I just was writing down a couple of things. We have costs, project funding structure, building spaces and environments, site amenities, learning space disruptions, the surveys that you guys have received, people you've talked to, current building lifespan, use of new town open spaces, community use of the facilities, your personal feelings. These all go into it, and I'm sure it's a very complicated thing, but I would love to hear, if the members are willing discussion on how they're going to make that decision and what can the community or our project management team give you? What information can they give you to help you make these decisions? Do you want emails from community members? Do you want people approaching you at supermarkets? Like, what will help you? I think it's an important thing for the community to know and understand. Thank you all for all your time that you're putting into this.
We're going to see you at the festival, right?
Oh, yeah.
Scott, just sign up. Thank you, Scott. Any other public comments today?
I know we don't typically respond, but do we want to address the fact that we have an evaluation matrix? We've been using it. It sounds like you might be a little bit newer to some of the meetings. Is that?
No, I've seen most of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The main one where you reduce down the options to the current 5. I'm aware of that. Yes.
Okay.
All right, well, a lot of information tonight. Thank you, everyone, for your time and for your patience, both those here in person as well as at home. As a reminder, our next meeting is June 25th. We will have a lot to discuss then. Unless there's anything further tonight. Julie, anything further? you can think of?
No?
With that, we'd look for a motion to adjourn tonight.
So moved.
Thank you. Second. David, all right. Roll call one last time.
Diane Allen,
Yes.
Glenn Brand,
Yes.
Alice Brown LeGrand,
Yes.
Michael Camosio,
Yes.
Justin Couche,
Yes.
Christine Holleran,
Yes.
Dennis Kelly,
Yes.
Paul
All right.
Milani. Hey, Christine Pendergast here. Yes. David Ragsdale,
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero,
Yes.
Stacy Scott,
Yes.
Nick Golden,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
Great. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.